There is a moment on the twin flame journey that almost no one talks about honestly enough. Not the moment you meet them, not the moment you recognize them, not even the moment you fall into that intense, magnetic soul-deep connection, but the moment they disappear. One day they are there. Their presence feels woven into your breath, your thoughts, your sense of reality. And the next day, silence. No explanation that makes sense. No closure that soothes the pain. Just distance, absence, and a question echoing in your mind. If this connection was real, why would it hurt like this? At first, the mind rushes to logical conclusions. Maybe it was never twin flame at all. Maybe you imagined everything. Maybe you loved more than they did. Maybe you weren't enough. And yet, despite all the doubts, you feel it in your body, in your heart, in your energy. This is not an ordinary ending. Because ordinary relationships end with anger, relief, or indifference. This one ends with an ache that feels ancient. A grief that doesn't belong only to this lifetime. A silence that somehow speaks louder than words. This is where many people break. They blame themselves. They chase answers. They replay every conversation, every message, every moment, searching for the exact second everything went wrong. But what if nothing went wrong? What if the disappearance itself is not a failure of the connection, but a phase of it? This idea is deeply uncomfortable, especially when you're in pain. Because pain wants a villain. Pain wants a reason that can be fixed, corrected, undone. Yet the twin flame journey rarely offers that kind of simplicity. Instead, it confronts you with something far more confronting: stillness, emptiness, and yourself. When your twin flame disappears, it doesn't just feel like losing a person. It feels like losing a mirror. They were the one who reflected your deepest wounds and your highest potential, often without saying a word. Their presence activated everything you had buried. Abandonment wounds, fear of rejection, fear of not being chosen, fear of losing control. And now that mirror is gone, or so it seems. This is where the real confusion begins. Because on the surface, separation feels like abandonment. But on an energetic level, something else is happening entirely. The absence forces you to sit with the questions you were avoiding when they were around. Who am I without them? What parts of myself did I outsource to this connection? Where did I seek validation instead of self-trust? What wounds did I expect them to heal for me? These questions don't arrive gently. They arrive like waves crashing against everything you thought you knew about love. And that is why the separation feels unbearable at first. Because twin flame separation is not just about missing someone. It's about losing the illusion that love comes from outside of you. Most people are taught that love means closeness, presence, reassurance, and consistency. So when a twin flame connection introduces distance, silence, and uncertainty, it feels like a contradiction. How can love exist without presence? How can union exist without togetherness? This is the paradox that marks the beginning of true awakening on the twin flame path. The mind says, union means being together. The soul whispers, union begins when you no longer need to be. But in the early stages, that whisper is drowned out by pain. You may find yourself asking, why would the universe bring someone so powerful into my life, only to take them away? Why awaken me just to leave me broken? Why show me unconditional love, then remove the source of it? These are not signs of weakness. They are signs that the connection has touched something profound within you. Because shallow connections do not dismantle your identity. They do not collapse your old patterns. They do not force you to rebuild yourself from the inside out. Twin flames do. And separation is often the catalyst. Not because the universe is cruel, but because growth requires space. Think about it this way. When two flames are placed too close together before they are stable, they don't merge, they consume. They burn too hot, too fast, until one or both are extinguished. Distance, in this sense, is not rejection. It is regulation. The separation creates a pause in which each soul is invited to strengthen its own light, without relying on the other to fuel it. This is not something the ego wants to hear.
The ego wants reunion.
The ego wants confirmation. The ego wants timelines, promises, guarantees. But the twin flame journey is not designed to satisfy the ego. It is designed to dismantle it. And so, the disappearance happens. Often suddenly, often painfully, often without the explanations you crave. And yet, This moment marks the true beginning of the journey, because until now, the connection was happening to you. From here on, it begins happening within you. The separation strips away distractions. It removes the emotional high. It takes away the external mirror so that you can become your own. And this is where the deepest transformation starts. Not in union, not in romance, but in the quiet, aching space where you are left alone with yourself and can no longer run from what you see. So if you are here watching this because your twin flame disappeared, let this land gently. You are not being punished. You are not being abandoned. And you are not failing the journey. You are standing at its threshold. The pain you feel is not proof that the connection is over. It is proof that something real has begun to shift. And in the next part, we will explore why this separation phase is not a detour, but a necessary stage of growth, healing, and self-love that makes true union possible. Not outside of you, but within. After the shock settles, after the tears slow down, after the mind exhausts itself searching for answers, one question begins to surface quietly. Was this separation really necessary? First, the idea feels offensive. Because when you're hurting, the last thing you want to believe is that your pain serves a purpose. Yet on the twin flame journey, pain is rarely random. This is where many people get lost, not because the connection ends, but because they misunderstand what it is meant to do. Most of us are conditioned to believe that if something is meant for us, it should feel easy. That love aligned with destiny should flow smoothly, without rupture or resistance. But twin flame energy does not come to make life comfortable. Comes to make life conscious. And consciousness requires disruption. If twin flames were meant to stay together from the beginning, untouched by fear, wounds, and ego, then separation would never occur. But that assumption overlooks one crucial truth. Twin flames meet before they are ready. They meet at the exact moment when their unresolved patterns are strong enough to be activated, but not yet healed. That is not a flaw in the journey. It is the point of it. Separation is not a punishment for loving too much or doing something wrong. It is a natural response to intensity meeting unintegrated wounds. Think of separation as a pressure valve. When the emotional, energetic, and psychological intensity becomes overwhelming, the system needs release. Distance provides that release. This is why separation often feels sudden and confusing. One moment, everything feels electric, destined, undeniable. The next, it collapses, not because the bond was false, but because it was too powerful to be sustained without inner stability. This is where the idea of design becomes important. Twin flame separation is not random chaos. It follows a pattern. Across cultures, spiritual traditions, and modern accounts, the same themes appear again and again. One runs, one chases, both suffer, both awaken. Different stories, same architecture. Because the journey is not about keeping two people together. It is about breaking unconscious cycles. When twin flames meet, they amplify each other's shadows as much as their light. Old abandonment wounds surface. Control issues rise. Fear of intimacy and fear of loss collide. And if those wounds are not faced, the connection becomes volatile. Separation intervenes where consciousness has not yet caught up. It creates a pause in which each soul is forced to turn inward, often unwillingly. This is the part that hurts the most. Because turning inward means losing distraction. No more analyzing their behavior. No more waiting for messages. No more emotional feedback loops. Instead, there is silence. And silence reveals everything you were avoiding. Many people interpret this phase as rejection. But rejection implies judgment. Separation is not judgment. It is containment. The universe is not saying, "You are not worthy of love." It is saying you are being asked to learn how to love without losing yourself. That distinction changes everything. In union without inner work, twin flames can unconsciously recreate trauma bonds. Intense, addictive, destabilizing dynamics mistaken for spiritual connection. Separation interrupts that pattern. It breaks the cycle of emotional dependency before it becomes destructive. This is why separation often happens at the peak of intensity, right when the connection feels most profound. Because intensity without integration leads to collapse. Distance creates the conditions for integration. It allows the nervous system to regulate. It allows suppressed emotions to surface. It allows identity to reform outside the relationship. This is not romantic. It is deeply uncomfortable. And yet, it is the only way union can eventually become sustainable, if it is meant to happen at all. Another uncomfortable truth: twin flame separation exposes illusions. Illusions about love. Illusions about destiny. Illusions about happiness being something another person gives you. When the twin flame is present, it's easy to believe that union will solve everything. That once you're together, the pain will stop. The emptiness will disappear. Life will finally feel complete. Separation shatters that fantasy. It forces you to confront a reality most people avoid their entire lives. No one can complete you without costing you yourself. The purpose of separation is not to teach you how to wait. It is to teach you how to stand. Stand in your own energy. Stand in your own worth. Stand without chasing, fixing, or proving. This is why separation often lasts longer than expected. Because the lesson cannot be rushed. It continues until attachment dissolves and presence takes its place. And here is the paradox that confuses so many people. Separation is often when the energetic bond becomes clearer, not weaker. People report feeling their twin flame's emotions without contact, dreams that intensify, synchronicities increasing, an unshakable sense of connection despite physical absence. This is not coincidence. It is because physical distance removes interference. When two people are no longer interacting on a 3D level, the soul-level connection becomes more visible. Separation strips the connection down to its essence. What remains is not romance. It is resonance. And resonance cannot be broken by distance. This is why chasing reunion too early often backfires. Because it attempts to rebuild the relationship on the same unhealed foundation that caused separation in the first place. Union without inner alignment recreates separation. Again and again. Until the lesson is learned. This is where patience becomes more than endurance. It becomes wisdom. Not patience for the other person. Patience with your own unfolding. With your resistance. With your grief. With the slow process of becoming whole. Separation teaches you that love is not proven by proximity. It is proven by integrity. By the ability to remain open without self-abandonment. By the ability to care without control. By the ability to trust without guarantees. And this is why separation is not a detour. It is the curriculum. It is the phase that transforms love from attachment into alignment. From longing into presence. From dependency into sovereignty. So if you are in separation right now, consider this. What if this distance is not here to break you, but to return you to yourself? What if union is not something you reach by holding on, but something that emerges when you let go? In the next part, we will explore the growth phase in depth, how separation catalyzes profound personal expansion, and why becoming whole on your own is not a betrayal of the connection, but the very thing that honors it. Because on the twin flame path, distance does not mean disconnection. It means preparation. Separation is where most people believe the twin flame journey stalls. But in truth, this is where it finally begins to move. What feels like abandonment on the surface is, underneath, a radical invitation. An invitation to grow without leaning on the connection as a crutch. This is what many call the growth phase. And it does not arrive gently. Growth rarely does. Before separation, the connection often carries an intoxicating intensity. Everything feels heightened: emotions, intuition, attraction, meaning. You feel seen in ways you've never been seen before. And because of that, it becomes tempting to orient your entire sense of self around the connection. Your mood rises and falls with their presence. Your sense of worth subtly mirrors their attention. Your future begins to orbit around the idea of us. This does not mean you are weak. It means the bond has activated something deep and unintegrated. The growth phase begins the moment that external anchor is removed. Suddenly, there is nothing to lean on but yourself. And this is where the real work starts. Distance forces you to confront the parts of your identity that were never fully yours to begin with. Many people discover, often painfully, that they were living in a state of emotional outsourcing. Outsourcing validation. Outsourcing safety. Outsourcing purpose. When the twin flame disappears, all of that comes rushing back. The mind asks, who am I without this connection? The heart asks, Was I ever enough on my own? The body asks. Why does this feel like withdrawal? These questions are uncomfortable because they expose dependency patterns we were taught to normalize. Society romanticizes losing yourself in love. Twin flame energy amplifies that tendency to its breaking point. The growth phase exists to reverse it. It teaches you how to stand in your own center, even when your heart feels raw. One of the first lessons of this phase is self-regulation. Without the emotional feedback loop of the twin flame, you are forced to learn how to soothe yourself, to sit with anxiety instead of chasing reassurance, to process grief instead of suppressing it, to experience longing without letting it dictate your actions. This is not passive waiting. It is active rewiring. The nervous system begins to unlearn the association between love and intensity, love and instability, love and fear. You start to recognize how much of your attraction was fueled by unresolved wounds. This realization can be disorienting because it challenges the idea that pain equals depth. In the growth phase, you begin to see that true depth feels grounded, not chaotic. Another profound shift happens during this time. You stop idealizing your twin flame, not because you love them less, but because you see more clearly. Distance removes projection. Without constant interaction, the fantasy dissolves. You begin to distinguish between who they truly are and who you needed them to be. This clarity is painful but liberating. It allows love to mature. And maturity is a form of growth that cannot happen in enmeshment. As you move through this phase, your life begins to reorganize itself. You may feel called to change careers, heal family dynamics, address childhood trauma, rebuild routines, reconnect with passions you abandoned. These shifts are not random. They are signs that your energy is returning to you. The growth phase is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming someone more aligned with your values, aligned with your truth, aligned with your inner authority. This is also when boundaries become essential. You learn that loving someone does not require sacrificing your well-being. You learn that longing does not justify self-neglect. You learn that growth sometimes means saying no to contact, to fantasies, to patterns that keep you stuck. This is especially difficult for the one often labeled the chaser, because growth requires releasing pursuit, not as punishment, but as empowerment. Chasing reinforces the belief that love must be earned. Growth teaches you that love responds to wholeness, not effort. This does not mean suppressing emotion. It means allowing emotion to move without controlling your behavior. A subtle but powerful transformation begins to occur. Your sense of time changes. You stop counting days of silence. Stop waiting for signs as proof of progress. Stop measuring your worth by whether reunion is close. Instead, you begin to feel something steadier. Presence. You start to experience moments of peace that are not dependent on anyone else's actions. This is growth, and it often arrives quietly, through ordinary days, through routines, through choosing yourself again and again. This phase also reveals a truth many resist. You cannot grow for union. Growth that is conditional is not growth, it is strategy. The growth phase asks you to evolve even if reunion never happens. That is the test. Not because the universe is cruel, but because love rooted in conditions is still attachment. True union, whether internal or external, requires freedom. Freedom from outcome. Freedom from control. Freedom from fear. This is why the growth phase often lasts longer than expected, because it is not about learning something new. It is about unlearning everything that keeps you small. You may feel moments of regression, days when the longing returns sharply, moments when you question everything again. This does not mean you are failing. Growth is not linear. Each wave reveals a deeper layer, and each layer brings you closer to yourself. Eventually, something shifts. You realize you are no longer growing because of the separation. You are growing because you choose to. The connection becomes inspiration, not fixation. You carry it with gratitude rather than desperation. And in that moment, something profound happens. The power dynamic dissolves. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing yourself. This is the growth phase. Not glamorous, not dramatic, but transformative. It is the phase that turns love into strength rather than weakness. In the next part, we will explore healing, how separation brings unresolved wounds to the surface, and why facing them is the gateway to self-love and energetic balance. Because growth prepares the ground. Healing allows something new to take root. Growth changes how you stand in the world. Healing changes how you feel inside yourself. After the initial shock of separation and the slow rebuilding of identity, a deeper layer begins to emerge, often unexpectedly. This is the healing phase, and it is not gentle. If growth teaches you independence, healing teaches you honesty. Honesty about the wounds you carried long before your twin flame ever appeared. Because twin flame separation does not create pain, it reveals it. What you feel during this phase is not only grief for the person you lost. It is grief for parts of yourself that were never protected, never validated, never seen. This is why the pain can feel disproportionate. You may ask yourself, why does this hurt more than past breakups? Why does it feel older than this lifetime? Why does it touch places I didn't know existed? The answer is simple and difficult. Because twin flame energy acts as a catalyst. It bypasses your defenses and goes straight to the core. During the healing phase, emotional memories begin to resurface. Not as clear stories but as sensations. Tightness in the chest. A sinking feeling in the stomach. Sudden waves of sadness without a clear trigger. These are not signs that you are regressing. They are signs that suppressed wounds are finally asking to be felt. One of the first wounds to appear is the abandonment wound. Separation often reactivates early experiences of being left, emotionally or physically. Moments when love felt conditional. Moments when connection disappeared without explanation. Moments when you learned to brace for loss. The twin flame did not cause this wound. They touched it. And distance forces you to sit with it instead of projecting it onto them. This is why healing cannot be rushed. The nervous system needs time to learn that absence does not equal annihilation. That silence does not mean worthlessness. That being alone is not the same as being unloved. Another wound that surfaces is the loss of self-trust. During the connection, you may have ignored your intuition to maintain closeness. You may have minimized red flags or over-justified inconsistency. Healing requires facing this without self-blame. Not to shame yourself, but to reclaim discernment. You begin to ask different questions. Where did I abandon myself to stay connected? What did I tolerate that didn't feel right? What boundaries did I ignore out of fear? These questions are uncomfortable because they shift responsibility inward. Not in a way that accuses, but in a way that empowers. Healing is the process of learning to choose yourself without closing your heart. This phase also exposes attachment patterns. Many discover anxious attachment they never knew they had. Others confront avoidant tendencies they used to hide behind independence. Separation strips away the illusion that love is something you manage. It reveals how much of your behavior was driven by survival, not choice. This realization can feel destabilizing, because it challenges your identity. But it is also freeing, because awareness creates options. The healing phase teaches you how to feel without reacting, how to allow emotion to move without turning it into action. This is one of the most difficult lessons. You learn to sit with longing without reaching out, to feel sadness without collapsing into it, to experience love without needing to possess. This is emotional maturity, and it is forged in stillness. Another layer of healing involves grief. Not just grief for the relationship, but grief for the fantasy. The fantasy that this person would save you, that union would fix everything, that love would finally feel safe. Letting go of that fantasy hurts, because it means letting go of hope as you once understood it. But what replaces it is something more stable. Acceptance. Acceptance does not mean giving up. It means releasing the belief that pain has to look different to be meaningful. In this phase, many people experience moments of profound clarity. They realize that much of what they called love was entangled with fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being chosen. Fear of not being enough. Healing begins when love is separated from fear. This is also when self-compassion becomes essential, because healing brings vulnerability. You may feel raw, exposed, emotionally tender. Old coping mechanisms no longer work. Distraction feels hollow. Avoidance feels exhausting. So you learn to meet yourself differently, with patience instead of judgment, with curiosity instead of control, with kindness instead of pressure. This is not indulgence. It is repair. repairing the relationship you have with yourself. And that relationship is the foundation of every other connection. As healing deepens, something unexpected happens. Your relationship to your twin flame shifts. The intensity softens. The desperation fades. The love remains, but without urgency. You stop needing them to be a certain way. You stop needing answers. You stop needing proof. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you care without attachment. This is the essence of healing. Not the absence of emotion, but the absence of fear around emotion. You begin to trust yourself again. To trust your feelings without being ruled by them. To trust your boundaries without guilt. To trust your capacity to love without losing yourself. Healing teaches you that wholeness is not something you achieve. It is something you allow. Allowing pain to pass through without defining you. Allowing love to exist without owning it. Allowing uncertainty without panic. This is why separation is such a powerful healer. Because it removes the distractions that keep wounds hidden. Gives you space. Space to feel. Space to grieve. Space to integrate. And in that space, something sacred happens. You return to yourself. In the next part, we will explore self-love. Not as a concept, but as a lived practice that emerges naturally after healing. Because self-love is not something you force. It is something that grows when the wounds are finally acknowledged. Healing opens the wound. Self-love is what teaches it how to close. After the layers of grief, fear, and old pain have been felt, after the nervous system begins to soften instead of brace, something subtle starts to shift. You notice it not in grand moments but in quiet ones. A day when you no longer wake up checking your phone first. An evening where the silence doesn't feel threatening. A moment when you realize you are breathing more deeply than before. This is not numbness. It is presence. Self-love on the twin flame journey is often misunderstood. It is not affirmations repeated in the mirror. It is not forcing positivity. It is not pretending you no longer care. Self-love is the moment you stop negotiating your worth with someone else's attention. When the twin flame was present, they acted as a powerful mirror. They reflected your light and your wounds. Their gaze made you feel seen. Their absence made you feel invisible. Self-love begins when you realize that your existence does not depend on being witnessed. This realization can feel unsettling at first, because so much of your identity may have been shaped by how deeply they felt you. Without that mirror, you are left with a raw question. Who am I when no one is reflecting me back? Self-love is not answering that question immediately. It is learning to sit with it without panic. In this phase, you stop asking, why am I not enough for them? And start asking, how have I been enough for myself today? The shift is small but revolutionary. Self-love expresses itself in choices. Choosing rest instead of rumination. Choosing honesty over fantasy. Choosing boundaries over hope that hurts. These choices do not always feel good. Sometimes they feel lonely. But loneliness in self-love is different from abandonment. Loneliness is the space where you finally hear your own voice. One of the hardest aspects of this phase is releasing self-betrayal. You begin to notice how often you used to override your intuition for the sake of connection. How often you minimized your needs. How often you accepted ambiguity instead of clarity. How often you waited instead of living. Self-love asks you to stop doing that. Not by becoming closed or defensive, but by becoming grounded. You learn that loving someone does not mean placing your life on pause. That devotion does not require self-erasure. This is especially challenging for those who define love as sacrifice. Self-love redefines love as presence. Presence with yourself. Another important transformation happens here. You stop seeing self-love as preparation for reunion. This is crucial, because self-love practiced as strategy will collapse under pressure. True self-love does not ask, if I heal enough, will they come back? It asks, how do I care for myself regardless of the outcome? This question changes the energetic dynamic completely. When your sense of worth is no longer tied to reunion, the connection loses its power to destabilize you. You become emotionally sovereign, not detached, not indifferent. Sovereign. Sovereignty means you can feel deeply without losing yourself. You can love without bargaining. You can hope without clinging. You can release without resentment. Self-love also teaches you how to be alone without being empty. You begin to enjoy your own rhythms, your own routines, your own quiet joys, your own unfolding. This does not happen overnight. There are days when the longing resurfaces, days when memory pulls you backward. Self-love does not eliminate these moments. It holds them. It says, you are allowed to miss them and still move forward. That permission is healing. As self-love deepens, you may notice your standards changing. You no longer crave intensity for its own sake. You value consistency, emotional safety, reciprocity, not because you lowered your expectations but because you raised your self-respect. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the twin flame journey. People think self-love means turning away from the connection. In truth, it means turning toward yourself. And when you do that, the connection either transforms or releases you. Both outcomes are acts of love. Self-love also brings discernment. You begin to distinguish between intuition and obsession, between longing and attachment, between love and trauma bonding. This clarity is not harsh. It is compassionate. It allows you to see the connection without distortion, to honor what was real without romanticizing what was harmful, to hold gratitude without erasing pain. At this stage, many people experience a surprising sense of peace. Not happiness in the conventional sense. Peace. A grounded knowing that you will be okay, no matter what happens. This peace does not come from answers. Comes from self-trust. Trust that you can handle uncertainty. Trust that you can survive loss. Trust that you do not need to be chosen to be whole. This is the heart of self-love. Not confidence, not pride, but inner safety. When you create safety within yourself, love stops feeling like a risk. It becomes a choice. And this is where something profound occurs. The twin flame no longer defines your worth. They become a chapter, not the entire story. An influence, not an identity. Self-love does not erase the connection. It contextualizes it. It places it where it belongs, within a life that is rich, full, and self-directed. In the next part, we will explore real-life examples. How people move through separation, growth, healing, and self-love in tangible ways. Because this journey is not abstract. It is lived one choice at a time. And each choice toward yourself is a step closer to true union. Whether that union is shared with another, or rooted entirely within you. If theory explains the twin flame journey, experience is what makes it real. Behind every spiritual concept is a human being, breathing, hurting, hoping, and learning in real time. In this part, we turn away from abstraction and into lived experience. Because one of the most common roles people recognize themselves in is the chaser. The chaser is not weak. The chaser is awake first. They feel the connection intensely. They recognize its significance early. They sense the depth before it can be explained. And because of that awareness, they move toward the bond with urgency. What is often misunderstood is this. Chasing is not about obsession. It is about fear of loss mixed with profound recognition. For many chasers, the twin flame connection feels like coming home after a lifetime of searching. And when that home suddenly disappears, panic sets in. Let's look at a real-life pattern. A woman meets her twin flame unexpectedly. The connection is instant, familiar, magnetic, emotionally overwhelming. She feels seen without having to explain herself. He mirrors her emotions, her wounds, her potential. For the first time, she feels understood at a soul level. Then just as suddenly he pulls away. Communication slows. Presence fades. Excuses replace clarity. The chaser feels the shift before it becomes obvious. Her intuition sounds the alarm. And so she reaches out. She asks questions. She seeks reassurance. She tries to restore the closeness. From the outside, it may look like neediness. From the inside, it feels like survival. Because the separation triggers something ancient. Not just the fear of losing him, but the fear of being left again. This is where many chasers spiral. They replay conversations endlessly. They analyze tone, timing, words. They search for the mistake that caused the withdrawal. But the truth is uncomfortable. The withdrawal was not caused by something they did. It was caused by what the connection activated. For the chaser, the first phase of separation feels unbearable. They may lose sleep. They may struggle to focus. They may feel disconnected from everything except the longing. And this is often where shame appears. They judge themselves for caring too much, for not being stronger, for not letting go easily. But chasing is not a character flaw. It is a trauma response, often rooted in early experiences where love was inconsistent or conditional. The twin flame did not create this pattern. They illuminated it. The turning point for many chasers comes not through reunion, but exhaustion. A moment when the constant reaching becomes too painful to sustain. They realize that chasing is costing them themselves. This realization hurts, because it feels like giving up. But it is not. It is the beginning of self-respect. In real-life accounts, this moment often looks simple. The chaser decides not to send the message, not to check social media, not to wait for signs, not because they don't care, but because they finally care about themselves enough to stop bleeding. This is when the growth phase truly takes hold. Without the distraction of pursuit, emotions surface more clearly. Grief rises, anger emerges, loneliness becomes undeniable. And beneath all of it, truth. Truth about how much they were hoping the connection would save them. Truth about how much they postponed their own life while waiting. Truth about how often they ignored themselves to maintain closeness. This awareness is painful, but transformative. The chaser begins to redirect energy inward. They invest in therapy. They reconnect with friends. They build routines that ground them. First, this feels empty, like a consolation prize. But over time, something shifts. The longing softens. Not because the love disappears, but because it no longer controls them. Many chasers report a strange phase where the connection feels quieter, but deeper. They still sense their twin flame, but the urgency fades. The desperation dissolves. The connection becomes something they carry, not something they chase. This is when self-love, discussed in Part 5, becomes embodied. Not as an idea, but as action. The chaser stops asking, "What can I do to make them come back?" and starts asking, "What kind of life do I want to live?" This shift is critical, because it changes the energetic dynamic. When the chaser stops chasing, they stop reinforcing the imbalance. They stop confirming the belief that love requires pursuit. And often, though not always, this is when the runner begins to feel the absence differently. But by this point, something important has happened. The chaser is no longer waiting. They are living. They no longer need reunion to feel complete. They are no longer defining success by contact. This does not mean they close their heart. It means their heart is no longer open at their own expense. In real-life stories, this phase often comes with grief for the old self. The version that waited, that hoped endlessly, that believed love required endurance. Letting go of that identity is part of healing, and it makes space for something stronger. Clarity. Clarity about boundaries. Clarity about what love should feel like. Clarity about their own worth. Many chasers reach a point where they realize something profound. Even if reunion never happens, this journey saved them. Saved them from repeating old patterns. Saved them from abandoning themselves again. Saved them from mistaking intensity for intimacy. This is not spiritual bypassing. It is integration. The twin flame connection served its purpose, not by staying but by awakening. And for the chaser, awakening often looks like reclaiming power. Power over choices. Power over attention. Power over life direction. This does not negate the connection. It honors it. Because the highest form of love is not attachment. It is evolution. In the next part, we will explore the perspective of the runner. What separation looks like from the other side. And how distance often forces them to confront fears they have spent a lifetime avoiding. Because both sides of the journey are shaped by the same force. Growth. Just expressed differently. One of the most painful beliefs during twin flame separation is this: if we are no longer talking, seeing each other, or sharing life, the connection must be fading. This belief feels logical. Human relationships are built on interaction, communication, proximity. So when those disappear, the mind concludes, something has been lost. But the twin flame connection does not operate by ordinary rules. It does not depend on constant contact to survive. In fact, it often becomes clearer when contact ends. This is one of the most confusing and transformative realizations on the journey. because distance removes what is familiar and reveals what is fundamental. Many people expect the bond to weaken during separation. Instead, they experience the opposite. They feel their twin flames' emotions without knowing why. They think of them moments before something happens. They dream of them vividly, sometimes with messages that feel more real than waking life. They encounter repeating signs, numbers, symbols, names. First, this can feel unsettling. If we are apart, why does the connection feel so present? The answer lies in understanding the difference between attachment and resonance. Attachment needs proximity. Resonance does not. When two people are physically together, there is constant sensory input. Conversation, touch, conflict, emotion exchanged in real time. This interaction is powerful, but it can also be noisy. It creates interference. When separation occurs, the noise drops away. What remains is the signal. The energetic bond, the part of the connection that exists beyond words and roles, becomes easier to perceive. This is why many people say separation is when the twin flame connection becomes more spiritual. Not because it suddenly turns mystical, but because the physical layer no longer dominates attention. Distance strips the connection down to its essence. And what remains is not romance. It is recognition. Recognition at a level deeper than personality, history, or circumstance. This realization often forces a radical shift in how you define connection. You begin to see that presence is not the same as proximity. Someone can be physically close and emotionally absent. Someone can be physically distant and energetically present. Twin flames teach this lesson mercilessly, because the bond was never meant to be sustained by constant reassurance. It was meant to awaken awareness. Another common fear during separation is, what if they forget me? This fear comes from ego, not from the soul. Ego experiences time linearly. It believes connection fades without maintenance. The soul does not operate that way. The soul recognizes frequency, not form. When two souls resonate at the same frequency, distance does not erase that resonance. It simply removes distractions. This is why forcing communication during separation often feels wrong. Not always, but often. Because it tries to translate something energetic into something verbal before both people are ready to hold it consciously. Silence, though painful, allows integration. It gives the nervous system time to recalibrate. It gives the ego time to loosen its grip. It gives the soul space to speak. Many people resist this idea because it feels passive. But stillness is not passivity. It is precision. It allows the connection to reorganize itself without interference. This is also why chasing signs or interpreting every synchronicity as a promise of reunion can become another form of attachment. Synchronicities are not instructions. They are confirmations of alignment. They are reminders that the connection exists beyond logic, not guarantees of outcome. Distance teaches you to hold the connection lightly, to feel it without trying to control it. This is one of the hardest lessons of the twin flame path, because control feels safer than trust. But control collapses resonance. Trust sustains it. Another profound shift occurs when you realize this. If distance does not break the bond, then your fear of losing it has been misplaced. What you were afraid of losing was not the connection. It was the identity you formed around it. The role, the story, the expectation. When those dissolve, it feels like loss. But what remains is more honest, less dramatic, less consuming, more real. This is where many people experience a deep internal quiet. Not emptiness, but spaciousness. The connection no longer demands attention. It coexists with your life instead of overshadowing it. You stop asking, "Are we still connected?" and start knowing, "We are." But that does not require action. This knowing is calm. It does not rush. It does not beg. It does not prove. Simply is. And in that state, something remarkable happens. The fear of distance dissolves. You no longer interpret silence as rejection. You no longer see separation as failure. You no longer need constant validation of what you feel. This is emotional maturity at a spiritual level. It allows love to exist without dependency, without surveillance, without bargaining, without fear. Distance also teaches you something else. Union does not begin when two people reunite. It begins when resistance ends. resistance to uncertainty, resistance to not knowing, resistance to outcomes you cannot control. When you stop resisting distance, it loses its power over you. It becomes neutral. And neutrality is freedom. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop suffering unnecessarily. You stop interpreting every gap as a threat. You stop asking the universe to explain itself. You begin to live. And paradoxically, this is often when the energy between twin flames becomes most balanced. Because balance does not come from closeness. It comes from alignment. Two people aligned with themselves naturally align with each other, whether they are together or apart. This is why distance does not destroy twin flame connections. It reveals their purpose. Not to bind two people together indefinitely, but to awaken both to a deeper truth about love. Love that is not conditional on presence. Love that does not collapse under silence. Love that survives transformation. In the next part, we will move toward the closing realization that true union is not something you chase, wait for, or earn. It is something that emerges naturally when you are no longer afraid of distance, because you are no longer distant from yourself. For most of the twin flame journey, union is imagined as a destination, a moment in the future, a reunion, a physical togetherness that finally makes sense of the pain. And for a long time, this belief keeps people moving. It gives meaning to separation. It gives purpose to growth. It gives hope during the hardest nights. But there comes a moment, often quietly without ceremony, when something shifts. You realize you are no longer waiting, not because you have given up, but because waiting no longer defines you. This is the moment inner union begins. Inner union is not dramatic. It does not arrive with fireworks or certainty. It arrives as calm, as steadiness, as a subtle but undeniable sense of alignment with yourself. You stop asking when things will resolve. You stop rehearsing future conversations. You stop scanning the horizon for signs. And instead you are here, present, rooted in your own life. This does not mean the twin flame connection disappears. It means it no longer governs your emotional state. Inner union replaces external dependence with internal coherence. For the first time, your thoughts, emotions, and actions begin to move in the same direction. There is no longer a split between what you feel and how you live. This is profound, because for much of the journey there was division. Part of you lived in the present. Part of you lived in hope. Part of you lived in fear. Inner union integrates those parts. You begin to trust yourself not because everything is certain but because you are. This trust is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows up in choices. You choose peace over obsession. You choose truth over fantasy. You choose self-respect over longing. These choices do not feel like sacrifice. They feel like relief. This is when you understand something essential. Union was never meant to complete you. It was meant to remind you that you already are. This realization often brings grief. Grief for the years spent believing wholeness was elsewhere. Grief for the self you abandoned in the process of loving. But that grief is gentle. It does not consume you. It integrates. Inner union also changes how you view the twin flame. You no longer see them as the missing piece. You see them as a mirror that did its work. You feel gratitude without attachment, love without expectation, connection without urgency. This is not indifference. It is maturity. You stop needing the story to end a certain way. You allow it to unfold or not without resistance. And in that surrender, something unexpected happens. You feel more alive. Because your energy is no longer trapped in anticipation. It flows into your life. Your creativity returns. Your curiosity deepens. Your relationships become more grounded. You show up differently. Not guarded, but whole. Inner union also dissolves polarity. The push and pull dynamic fades. The roles of runner and chaser lose meaning. Because those roles existed in imbalance. When you become balanced within yourself, there is no one left to chase or run from. There is only presence. This is why inner union cannot be forced. It emerges when you stop trying to manage the journey. When you release the idea that suffering earns reunion. When you stop measuring your progress by someone else's actions. Inner union asks one simple but radical question. Who are you when nothing is missing? Answering this does not require reunion. It requires honesty. Honesty about what you want. Honesty about what you tolerate. Honesty about how you treat yourself. Inner union is the alignment of that honesty with action. It is living as if your life matters now, not later. This is the moment many people realize something startling. If physical union happens, it will be a choice, not a rescue. And if it doesn't, they are still fulfilled. This is freedom. Freedom from outcome. Freedom from attachment. Freedom from fear. Inner union also reframes love itself. Love is no longer something that happens to you. It is something that moves through you. It does not require possession. It does not require certainty. It does not require permanence. It requires presence. This understanding transforms how you relate to everyone. You stop seeking intensity. You seek resonance. You stop confusing chaos with chemistry. You recognize peace as depth. Inner union does not make you passive. It makes you grounded. You can engage without losing yourself. You can love without abandoning yourself. You can open without collapsing. This is the highest integration of the twin flame journey. Not reunion, but embodiment. Embodiment of self-worth that does not fluctuate. Embodiment of love that does not depend. Embodiment of wholeness that cannot be taken away. And here is the paradox that surprises many. Inner union is often the very state that allows external union, if it is meant to occur. Not because you are trying to attract it, but because you are no longer blocking it with fear. When there is no agenda, there is space. When there is no grasping, there is flow. But by the time this happens, the outcome matters less, because you are already home. In the final part, we will bring everything together, offering a closing message of empowerment and a gentle invitation for the viewer to reflect on their own journey. Because twin flame separation is not a story of loss. It is a story of return, a return to yourself. Separation, in the context of a twin flame connection, can feel like the world has shifted beneath your feet. It can feel as if a part of your soul has been torn away, leaving a hollow ache that no one and nothing can fill. Yet, paradoxically, it is in this very absence that the deepest lessons of the journey emerge. In this final part, we explore why distance is not a punishment, why separation is not failure, and why the seeming void is, in reality, fertile ground for union, not the destruction of it. Distance as a teacher. When your twin flame steps away, it may initially feel devastating. You might experience waves of panic, longing, confusion, or even despair. You might replay memories, analyze conversations, or ask yourself endlessly, why are they gone? What did I do wrong? These reactions are natural. They reflect not your weakness, but the intensity of the connection and the mirror it holds up to your own soul. Distance is the teacher that pushes you to see yourself clearly. Without constant interaction, there is no distraction from your inner reality. Without the presence of the other, you are invited to confront patterns that have long gone unexamined. Old wounds of abandonment or neglect, emotional dependencies, patterns of compromise or self-erasure, unresolved trauma from past relationships. Distance forces growth. It is a crucible, shaping you into a stronger, more integrated version of yourself. It is why the twin flame journey is often described as love that burns and heals simultaneously. The invisible work of growth. The growth phase is rarely visible to others. It happens quietly, inside your own mind and heart. You start noticing your reactions without immediately acting on them. You observe emotional impulses and recognize their roots. You confront fears of loss, inadequacy, or unworthiness. This is hard work. It is messy. It can feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and sometimes even backward entirely. But each challenge strengthens the core of your being. Separation teaches self-reliance, not as a means of isolation, but as preparation for authentic union, whether internal or external. During this period, your attention gradually shifts from, how do I get them back? To, how do I reclaim myself? And that shift is the essence of growth. Healing, touching the core wounds. Alongside growth, healing begins to surface in unexpected ways. The twin flame connection acts as a mirror. It does not just reflect love, It reflects fear, insecurity, and unresolved wounds. Distance uncovers what proximity often masks. Without the constant feedback of presence, unresolved emotions rise to the surface, demanding acknowledgement. The healing process involves feeling grief and allowing it to move naturally, confronting fears of abandonment or rejection, examining patterns of attachment and emotional dependency, cultivating self-compassion in response to inner pain. This phase is challenging because it requires deep honesty. You may cry over things you did not realize you were holding. You may revisit painful memories that you thought were long resolved. Yet healing is transformative. It is the gateway to emotional sovereignty, the ability to feel without being overwhelmed, to love without being lost, and to exist fully without requiring constant reassurance. Self-love, your true anchor. Once healing begins to integrate, self-love emerges organically. This is not superficial self-love, slogans, affirmations, or forced positivity. It is grounded, embodied, and resilient. Self-love in the twin flame journey means recognizing your worth independent of another's presence, reclaiming agency over your emotions, choices, and attention, honoring your boundaries without guilt or compromise, finding joy, purpose, and fulfillment in your own life. Self-love transforms separation from suffering into empowerment. The absence of the twin flame stops being a void and becomes a mirror reflecting your wholeness. You are no longer waiting to be completed. You are already complete. When self-love is cultivated, union, whether internal or external, can happen naturally without desperation, neediness, or attachment. Distance reveals the true nature of union. At this stage, you begin to understand something revolutionary. Union is not dependent on proximity, consistency, or external validation. The twin flame connection is energetic and vibrational. Distance, rather than breaking it, clarifies it. Without constant interaction, the bond becomes less about drama, intensity, or obsession, and more about presence, resonance, and alignment. Signs, synchronicities, dreams, or intuitive feelings are not obligations or promises. They are confirmations that the energetic thread persists. The separation allows the relationship to exist in its purest form, a connection that transcends fear, control, and outcome. It teaches you that love is not possession. It teaches you that intimacy is not dependency. It teaches you that union begins from within. Inner union, the true home. Perhaps the most profound revelation of the twin flame journey is that union starts within. Before reconciliation, before any external reunion, inner union is required. It is the alignment of your mind, heart, and soul with yourself. It is the freedom to love without attachment. It is the ability to feel without needing a response. It is wholeness without seeking completion elsewhere. Inner union creates peace amidst uncertainty. It allows you to hold the twin flame in your heart without being consumed by longing or fear. It transforms the connection into a space of inspiration, not desperation. And once this inner union is achieved, external union, if it is meant to happen, occurs naturally, harmoniously, and without forcing or clinging. A question for reflection. At this stage of the journey, a simple but powerful question emerges. Can you love without needing them to prove their love to you? Can you feel the connection without being defined by it? Can you embrace the distance not as punishment, but as part of union itself? Answering these questions honestly is the key to awakening, because union is never about control. It is never about obligation. It is always about alignment, presence, and wholeness. Separation is not the end. It is the invitation to remember who you are. Every step of longing, growth, healing, and self-love leads to a deeper awareness. You are whole. You are enough. You are capable of loving freely and living fully. Distance is not a gap in the bond. It is a bridge to your own soul. It teaches lessons that proximity never could. Patience, self-respect, emotional maturity, and trust in the unseen flow of life. When you honor the journey, every moment of separation becomes sacred, because it is shaping you into the person capable of true union, inside first, outside second. Take a moment today to reflect. Sit quietly. Breathe. Feel the connection within. Ask yourself, how can I honor my wholeness today? Reach out gently to your own heart. Write, meditate, move, or create. Every small step toward self-love is a step toward awakening and authentic union. Remember, the path of the twin flame is not just about meeting the other. It is about meeting yourself. And in meeting yourself fully, you allow love in its purest form to flow freely, whether across distance or beside you.